guys, welcome back to another episode of the Thermal Gard Podcast. And if you guys are looking to listen to us or watch us, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts regularly, or if you want to watch the video version, we're on YouTube. So definitely feel free to like, comment, share. Please leave a rating. We read every single review and we read every single comment on these. So we'd love your feedback. But let's jump right into it. Today, we have a very special guest who I'm extremely excited about, and it is Matt Childers. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Hey, my pleasure, Rylan. Great to be with you guys.
Yeah. So honestly, Matt, I wanted to get you in here because, very well connected in the community, done a lot of business, know a lot of people, the stuff you're doing today is really cool. We'll get into that. But if you would, just start by giving us kind of a background on you, kind of where you grew up, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. I grew up right here in Lima, Ohio. I went to St. Charles Elementary School, and then I went to Lima Central Catholic. When I graduated from Lima Central Catholic, I actually spent a year playing basketball out at OSU Lima. It used to be called Lima Tech at the time, and just had this amazing experience. I wasn't ready to go away to school. I'm the baby of 10 grandchildren. My father died when I was 14 years old suddenly, and so it was just me and my mom. And as a result, I ended up saying, I'm really not prepared to go away to school. And it was the best decision I ever made because of those 10 grandchildren, 7 of them went to law school, and every one of them went to Miami University. So I am clearly the odd man out when it comes to our family reunions, although I've held the title of being president of our family now. It's almost a dictatorship. I've now been the president for almost 20 years. So as the baby, but I loved Lima growing up. I loved playing basketball. I traveled around Lima when I was younger, and I played for Coach Segerson. I captained the LCC basketball team when in 1985, and that gave me a great foundation. And then I ended up going to the University of Toledo. I graduated from the University of Toledo, and I thought I was going to law school, but I worked at Toledo Country Club, and I met a guy by the name of Dick Leiden who owned Milcor Lima Register at the time, and he had just bought Lima Register, and as a result, he said, "Hey, I want you to come down. I want you to look at my factory." Well, that factory happened to be on Cable Road, just by the what is now the Westgate area. And I went in naive, looking around, taking a tour of the factory, and I was like, "Dick, where are the cash registers?" Because it was Lima Register. Well, they were stamping HVAC registers that go for HVAC home residential buildings, commercial buildings, and had about 300 employees, a really good operation. And then the Milcor side, which he owned prior to that, it was a commercial construction company that sold all over the United States. And he said, "Hey," and so we go to lunch. We went to lunch at Burgundy's, which is no longer there, but right across the street. Mm-hmm. And he came back. He said, "Hey, I want to make you an offer. I want you to come work for me. I want you to be an area sales manager for me," which, of course, I had no idea what that meant. But he really liked me because we had played golf together. I had known him. I had gone to many dinners and so forth, lunches with him. And as it turned out, he wanted me to move to just above New York City. And then Lima Register was huge out there. That was the biggest footprint in the country for Lima Register. And then that included New England. That included all of the boroughs of New York, including Long Island and New Jersey. And so I ended up taking the job and not knowing anything what I was doing. I had a futon, I had an apartment, and I was traveling around, and I learned so much during those 10 years working for Dick. They ended up transferring me to Dallas at one point, and I covered the West Coast from there. So I got to see the country vis-a-vis Milcor and Lima Register. And so it was something that I did not plan. I was a history and political science major. But he gave me great training and then gave me great resources to be able to be successful at that. And as I was working there, Rylan, it was the advent of talk radio, but really sports talk radio at the time. So New York had just launched in the late 80s, Mike and the Mad Dog on 660 WFAN, which is still a very, very powerful radio station in the New York area now. They had Tony Kornheiser, Mike Lupica, the fabulous Sports Babe. They had all, and so I fell in love with sports talk radio. Then I moved to Dallas, and they won the Cowboys won 3 Super Bowls at the time, and they just started up all of these FM sports radio talk shows. And I fell in love with that. And so I was back in Lima at one point for a sales meeting, and I ran into Tom Francis, who I would call the dean and the all-time godfather of local radio here in Lima, Ohio. Tom was this wonderful, wonderful person, and he ended up taking me in. So I ended up getting offered a job at WIMA Radio, which at the time, I don't even know, it was either Lima Radio or J-Core, and I worked there for a handful of years and just loved it. And I got on the air a little bit, but I was really in sales.
Yeah.
And I became a sales manager. I was the sports marketing director. And then a gentleman from the New England area, ironically where I used to live, came into Lima, bought stations that happened to be right across from where Lima Register was on Cable Road. And his name was Gary Rosnick, and he asked me to come over, and I ended up becoming the president of that company, running those stations. We put the first ever FM sports talk radio station on the air. Of course, country in this area is king. It used to be called, we ended up calling it The Frog, but it was Froggy 93. And then we bought the Delphus station, which is WDOH at the time. And in the end, I ended up forming a little local group here, and we bought those stations from Gary and put them downtown. And so I actually melded like my love of sales and leadership and all of that with sports and radio, which I loved from the day that I grew up. People probably won't realize this, is how powerful radio was back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And we had legends here, locally that were on the air. And then there were others that were out of Detroit. J.P. McCarthy was a big hero of mine. He ran the morning show. And so that's really how I got back to Lima.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into the radio business. And that's how I ended up spending, the majority of my career, 10 years with Milcor and 20 years in the media. And I'm still doing a little talk show on Saturday mornings at 1150 WIMA to this day. And I'm very grateful for the friendships and the relationships and all of the community-related relationships that I made throughout that. So it's been, it wasn't my path. It was never what I thought I would end up doing. I thought at some point I was going to coach basketball because I loved basketball so much. But in the end, this is what became of me.
That's amazing. So I definitely want to dive in a lot of that. There's a lot to unpack. So let's jump back a little bit to, maybe you're coming out of college, you get this great sales job. Did anybody teach you sales? What was that training like? I mean, you're traveling around the country fresh out of college. You weren't planning on doing this. Take us through some of the lessons you had to learn, maybe some people that poured into you that helped.
Yeah, Frank Bloomquist was my first boss, and he went to the University of Michigan, and he was in that area before I was. So he got a promotion, and that's why there was this opportunity to be able to go out to the New England, New York area. And so he was a great mentor to me. In fact, I just recently played golf with him. He's just retired. And I was in Toledo recently and played golf with Frank. But he was a great trainer. They had great training skills because there was only maybe 6 salespeople across the country for Milcor. So there wasn't 35. So they could spend some time grooming those 6 people that were their salespeople, whether that was the Great Lakes states or whether that was down in the South, more so in the mid-Atlantic states of the Carolinas. But
what year was that, man?
So this would have been 1990, 1991 time frame, that start. They a lot of resources. And by the way, I had no idea what a vent was or what a Milcor, any type of roofing material was. I had zero idea. So, but they were very good about training. And by the way, this is a time when there are no computers.
Right.
So this is all via the phone or in person. So that was very interesting. I think in maybe my second or third year, I did get what was called a car phone at the time, and so I had that. But for the most part, yeah, it was pretty rudimentary. And I will say that some of the training that they gave me, in terms of, I still use to this day, which is, let's say that you have repeat customers, and certainly a lot of us do. I'm sure at Thermal Gard you have some repeat customers.
Yeah.
But I'll look on the books to this day, whatever it is that I'm working on, whether it's at the Chamber of Commerce or whether Allen Lima Leadership or back in the day when we had our radio stations, what's missing that was there last year. So, for example, if somebody in Milcor's world, Lima Register, bought $100,000 worth of registers in the month of September, and it's not on the books yet, are they going to spend that money? It was the thing that I learned the most from Frank, was going through what we called sales tapes at the year, but all they are sales reports. But they were big green IBM printers that printed this off, and it showed you all of the history of what these customers did. And there might have been 500 customers, and 20% of those were the top ones, and you could look out and you could see what they were. So that to me was so important, was being able to identify via data what's important to your priority of who do you need to go see. Well, hey, if that 100,000, 60% of that came from one distributor out in Long Island, I needed to go visit them and make sure we were all on the same page. So that's one of the things that I learned. I would take that and still to this day use it.
That's fascinating. I think you're the first guest to bring that up. You literally just poured over data to find your customers and what they needed. Well, of course, you're going to be successful if you're just using the data to go and pitch to the right person.
And then the next part is that if that person's the same person, that's where it, to me, in business, where it can get convoluted or it can get a little complicated, is if you lose somebody who's your buyer, who makes that decision, whether that's in the window world or whether that's in the construction world or whether that's in the media world, that person may not have the same feeling that last buyer had.
Yeah.
And so then you have to, I think as a good salesperson, you have to ask questions as to what's important to them and how have we performed for you in the past. And that goes to those, well, I have 4 pillars of sales, but we can talk about that later. So.
Okay. Gotcha. So let's kind of transition here. How did you said you came back to Lima? You're really into radio.
Yeah.
When did becoming an entrepreneur really come on your radar? Was that always the plan, or just fell in your lap?
Yeah, that one just that's certainly, it's my life is probably just a series of accidental coincidences that I met Dick Leiden. I ended up working for him for a decade. I met Tom Francis. I ended up working in the radio world for 20 years. And that one definitely fell in my lap, which was, and I will say it this way, which the group, which was Maverick Media, and then they had some extended groups, and then there were some folks that he was connected with that had hundreds of radio stations. And so I kind of got to learn that business, and I saw how they operated and what that process was. And as a result, they wanted to go buy some more stations. Lima, they were in Ohio, they were in Wisconsin, they were in Illinois, Indiana, and they asked me, would I have the inclination to put a group together to buy those stations, because they were probably going to sell them. And we see that in media, certainly to this day. It wasn't as prevalent maybe even 30 years ago, but then, as things consolidated a little bit, these guys want to get in these bigger markets, and what they're looking for is return. And so for us, it was hey, we're probably going to sell. We're going to sell them to somebody, and it might end up being a bigger, like a conglomerate, kind of a big corporate media. And I felt really attached to Lima. I felt really good about Lima growing up here. And I also felt really good about our employees. I felt great in this connection. I knew their kids. I knew they were going to college, and I know what happens typically when big business comes in and buys a smaller, whether that's a bank or a grocery store. They usually change things up and people lose their jobs. And I wanted to preserve that as long as possible. And so that's what we did. And I think that was exciting too. I mean, it was a great opportunity to, look at it and say, hey, how can we do this and keep it local, and really put ourselves in a position to be successful, where we were fighting against kind of some larger entities, but it was a whole lot of fun. And we had a great staff. Our retention rate was outstanding.
Yeah.
In my years in the radio. So yeah, everybody I ever see that used to be with us on the radio or in my orbit, so to speak, around Lima and on the radio, everybody still has the bug.
Oh yeah.
So
100%.
That's what you're doing it right now.
Yeah.
Audio and podcasting and being able to deliver, interesting things throughout conversations and music is still a winner.
Well, interesting people help that.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
Matt, take us through like some of the struggles. I mean, because you're jumping into this. I know you got a lot of sales experience, but taking over a business, starting a business, it's not easy. Tell us some of the ugly stuff you had to go through.
Yeah, I would say there's a number of things, but in the radio world, specifically, the FCC, which regulates all of the radio stations, the TV entities, they don't regulate the newspapers. It's the electronic things that they do, not podcasting, at least not at this juncture. So you really have to learn the law, and you have to have a really good media attorney that is connected to the FCC and knows the rules, knows the law, knows what you have to do. So there's all kinds of things, like you have to pay royalties to these different entities that, the music people, the Taylor Swifts of the world, and the country folks that we all know so well. They aren't going to just give you that music for free. Mm-hmm. So you have to pay an entity that then pays them, but you have to pay that, and some of them are based on your sales, like your overall sales. So the better you do, the more they make. And if you can think of that in like New York City, for example, they're doing millions and millions of dollars. Let's say that K104 is doing $100 million in revenue. They have to pay a percentage of that to the royalty group that then pays that out to the artists. So ours is way smaller than that. But you have to learn all of those things. The other things that you have to learn, and I will say that I am clearly better on the top line side. I'm a better revenue generator than I am an expense and really wanting to do those details of the expense side. I'm way better at the driving the revenue and than all of those things. But I think that's important. Then there's human resources. You've got to, that was something that we just did on a kind of a small basis, but there's workers' comp, there's all of these things that you have to do. And then, you have people working for you and they have issues going on in their life. Everybody knows that if you're running an organization, there's going to be people that some of them perform at really high levels and then some don't perform at some. And we tried to, coach and teach our folks as best as possible. But then there's the departures. Sometimes you have to depart with your relationships with some people. I think that's a hard part of that. But I would say the biggest part is all the things that you have to do in order to run the business, run it efficiently, run it effectively, cash flow it, and then be able to know that, like, there's a rule that if somebody on the FCC side, somebody once did this to a radio friend of mine who was out of state, and I forget how they were doing it, but they were doing an infomercial and they weren't saying the right nomenclature. Like, this is not, the views are not reflective of the station. Mm-hmm. And the FCC ended up fining them $90,000 for that and held up a sale. And so you've got to be really careful and very protective. So those would be the top line for me on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned staff, but a lot of these things, you mentioned things that maybe you didn't like, or maybe you weren't as necessarily, gifted at as you were
Yeah,
sales or,
yeah,
generating revenue.
yeah.
So, aside from hiring people, what was the best way to address those issues in your business that you found, really made you successful?
Yeah, I think that my brother had a book on his night table when I was growing up. I was saying I was the youngest of 10 um, grandkids, but I had two older brothers. One went to law school. One was an educator, and he had on his nightstand. I just remember that it was Woody Hayes's book, and it said, "You win with people." And I always felt like if we could get the right people, I always looked at it through the sports lens. Like if you saw these great teams, usually they had great coaching, and usually they had great contributors as players, and they were all willing to sacrifice to be a part of that team. And I think we did that in a really, really special way. Some of the folks that I'm now back over at what is now iHeart, which we're in the iHeart studios, and um, I worked there for 4 years or 5 years, and a lot of those folks came over and worked with me. And I always like to say with me, not for me. They worked with me. A lot of those folks came over once we bought those stations, which I think said a lot about what our culture and what our climate was all about. One of what I always said was one of our great coup d'etats was we got Vince Coza to come over from WLAO TV to be our sports director and do our high school ball games. And the late Vince Coza, who was a dear friend of mine, he always did radio on Saturday mornings for us and with us, but I then offered him a full-time position, and that was a huge game changer for us. He was instrumental in, because we had this FM sports station, which was not heard of back in 2010. An FM sports station was not heard of,
Right.
and we were able to put that station on the air, and it's a very, very popular station to this day. But it's the sports station in Northwest Ohio or West Central Ohio, and so getting Vince to come on there was outstanding. And we did so many high school ball games and so many sport, and then we had Sports Talk with Koza, which was a staple every afternoon, and then he ended up going into the morning. So those are some of those are some of my headlines, and I'm like, I'm really proud of that. And then being able to retain the people that we brought over, who loved radio and were also great teammates.
Something you just touched on with the Woody Hayes book, and you
Mhm.
mentioned like tying everything back to sports, being an athlete and kind of going through that in your youth. How does sports and being on a team and everything, how does that relate to business, and how do you draw those connections, and where do you see those connections?
That's a great question. I think it, just because of what I experienced, and really in life, I think you can only take your experiences and be able to kind of see through that lens of, how that impacts you. But for me, sports was everything to me because it gave me that outlet. It was a very positive outlet. And I think it's, where I'm at now, at Allen Lima Leadership, we have 4 pillars at Allen Lima Leadership, and it's called Lead, Connect, Grow, and Serve. And of those 4, I feel like I got a really good dose of leadership when I was in high school by Coach Segerson. I was the captain of the team. It let me be a leader when I was a very young person, meaning young person at 17, 18 years old. And then also, it gives you this great resiliency because you're going to get knocked down in sports. You're never, most don't always win. I'm sure there's somebody out there that wins all the time, but who's the Usain Bolt, like the guy who was the runner, the great Olympic runner. There's probably people, but for the most part, sports is really a snapshot of business, which is, you have to be, you have to put together a really good team. You probably have to have really good coaches. You have to be able to share. You have to be able to be trustful. You have to be honest. with people, even if they're not doing the greatest job. You have to be honest with them and share with them that you're here to help them. And so I look at all of those factors, and I say sports is the perfect snapshot for business, because you do get knocked down. You have some losses. I mean, if you lose a customer, if you lose a bid to somebody in your industry, that's a bummer, because you spent a lot of time on that. But what sports does is it gives you that next opportunity that, hey, we've got a game the next day, or we've got a game the next week, and we're going to go prepare for that, and we're going to go win that one, because if we do that, then we just made up for what we may or may not have lost.
Yeah.
So that's a great question.
That's great.
Austin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Emily?
Yes. So I did
Yeah.
have a question for you.
Yes.
Going into, you went for political science,
Yeah.
and then you got into sales,
Yeah.
and then eventually radio. What is something that you wish you would have known going into those jobs that you learned over time?
Yeah, I got lucky, because probably if you're not going to go to law school or go into education, the political science history degree is probably not. There's just no straight line to this. But I will say it gave me the great ability to be a really good writer and be a very good communicator. To be able to, although I'm patting myself on the back here, but LOL. But I will say that it gave me the ability to really communicate. So that was good. But I would say if you really want to go into business, it's probably better to get some skill set, whether that's an accounting degree, a finance degree, marketing, those type of things. So that for me, I did not have obviously, as I've just shared, I've not had a straight line to anything. So that to me would be, if you really, a lot of successful people that I see, they knew in 5th or 6th grade they wanted to do this, and they did it. So
Awesome.
Yeah. But before we get back onto your story and everything, I'd love to get your take on kind of the current dynamic state of sports media right now, where you mentioned all these huge talk shows, making lots of money in New York and everything like that. Now we're seeing lots of guys who can have a similar reach from their basement on the internet and things like that. What do you make of that change and that shift in terms of what sports media is looking like?
Yeah, in some ways I'm thrilled about it, and in other ways I'm very disappointed in it. I am not a opinion shaper. I'm not a hot take person that likes to just take a position and just hang on that. I'm so much more inquisitive, and that's probably why I was the lead guy. Meaning I was not the analyst mostly. I was the person that was asking the questions. But I am definitely not a screamer and a yeller and a hot take person. So that part of it, I'm very disappointed in. If you add up all of the 3 or 4 different jobs that Stephen A. Smith has to this day, and not begrudging him, because he's obviously done he's good for him. What a incredible career he's had, but he's probably close to making $40 million a year through his $20 million at ESPN. He makes about $13 million on Sirius XM, and then he has some other entities that he does on YouTube. And so that, to me, I'm not in that camp. I'm more in the camp of Dan Patrick, who asks questions, loves to have really interesting guests on, and then can kind of go into a deeper dive with them. That's where I'm at. In terms of the sports media revenue, if you look at the top 100 TV shows on linear TV last year, 90 of them were the NFL or college football, the highest rated. And so sports has never been more flush with money and influence. But I'm more I'm less inclined on the kind of the hot take, that type of WrestleMania type sports talk than I am about really trying to get something out of somebody that would be interesting and maybe helpful.
Your old window cleaner is trash. Ditch it and get Dudley on duty. It's what the pros use.
Yeah. So speaking of, let's go back into your story a little bit. Would you kind of take us to kind of the end of your, I guess, owning the radio station and kind of that transition for you personally?
So to go back to the radio station, in terms of that.
Yeah, kind of coming to an end, winding down, maybe, how you got out of that business.
Yeah, so so that will go back to that'd be 2018, like the year of 2018. And, we had owned those stations. We ended up selling them to Wolf Boom, which is a group out of Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
My investors were happy, and I will say this. I mean, in the end, it was we were very fortunate because then COVID hit right after that. So we had sold them in 2018, and if you think about COVID and you think about kind of our what the landscape of our world looked like then, a lot of the radio stations, advertisers, which is the jet fuel for paying everybody that works at the radio stations.
Yep.
Restaurants, retail, car dealerships, they're all closed. They're not operating, or they're operating in a very limited capacity.
Yep.
And so we weren't unique to that, meaning Lima, but man, revenues in the radio world and TV a little less just because you're staying at home, but they just went down because there just wasn't as many advertisers advertising. And so that was kind of a sad part of it, but I was really happy for my partners who got out of it at the time that they didn't have to go through that with me, because then that really would have created some layoffs and some, at least temporarily. And so it would have created some heartache. And then if you lay people off and you with the hope to bring them back, well, maybe they've moved on to something else that they really like, or that they're doing really well at. And so that would have been tough. So we were really fortunate in that. And as we're doing that, and they always had said to me, hey, if we ever get an opportunity to sell, they were just doing it. I don't want to say as a favor, but they were doing it for a short-term investment, not a long. The goal was for me to buy them out, but at the time that wasn't possible in terms of just where we were, and so it turned out to be a great thing. Couple that with, and then we'll get into this, but couple that with, I was sitting on the board of Allen Lima Leadership, which is under the Chamber umbrella, and we needed a new executive director, and we thought we had one. This person went all the way down through the steps, and then she either had some cold feet or didn't want to do some of the things that were required, and so as we're, I'm in these kind of private conversations, and I know we're about ready to pull the trigger on the sale. I just talked to the president of the board, who was a friend of mine, because I sat on the board, and said, hey, before you interview anybody else, I'd love to have an opportunity to I've put together something to be the executive director of Allen Lima Leadership, and I think this will be a great fourth chapter for me, meaning the fourth quarter of my professional career. I always take things in basketball parlance, sorry. And this would be my fourth quarter. And I said, I would love to do this for my last quarter of my professional career. And so that's how that happened. So it worked. Again, accidental, everything accidental in my life. That should be my biography, should be, the accidental, not salesperson, but the accidental, professional. So
that's awesome. So if you would kind of take us, what is all, what was your vision, and how did you kind of set up and start going to execute that vision? Yeah,
that's a great question. I had been involved since 2001 with Allen Lima Leadership. I graduated, I guess from 2000, because you start in 2000 and then you graduate in 10 months, like September through May. So it's like a school year. You meet once a month, and you do, we talked about lead, connect, grow, and serve. you get a dose of leadership in there. You get these connections with, colleagues and folks you didn't know, and some maybe that you did know that are from different industries. And we were supposed to graduate, by the way, we were supposed to graduate on September 11th, 2011. So 9/11, that was our date. And that happened to be the terrorist attacks at the World Trade Center. And so we postponed it for a month. That was a really impactful time. But I went through it, and the executive director at the time was Mickey Vollmer, and she's really the matriarch of all. She took it to a new level from where it was. The chamber started it in 1990. This is our 35th anniversary. We just had a 35th anniversary here down at the social house here in the Central District. And Mickey was there for, and I'm just going to ballpark it, but like 14 or 15 years. And so everybody knew Mickey, but she took it to a new level, and she got the community behind it, and she got all these stakeholders that wanted to be a part of it. And we started going from, 20 people in the class to, 25. And today I think we have 38 in the new class. But she was instrumental in my connection there, because I really loved Mickey, and I loved what she did with the class and how you learned about our community. Because I think her vision was, if you know more about your community, the more you know about your community, the better citizen you'll be. The more you can connect and be contributors to your community. And so every year we started a media day, and she would come through our radio stations. And then she would go through TV stations and Lima News, and so she'd spend one third with us. But I was heavily involved in that for all of those years, and I would take the classes through, and I was really, really very happy to be a part of that. And then they asked me to be on the board in, I think it was like 2012. And so I was on the board. Mickey had just retired, and Matt Otto came in as the executive director. And so that's when I came on the board. And so that was my relationship there. And my vision for it was, this is great, but can we do some more things with the curriculum that will be helpful to our students, whether that's public speaking, whether that's our Shark Tank competition that we now do with the class, and other tours and other community connections that we do. And so our surveys tell us, so I've had, let's see here, so just quick LCC math here. So, just say 8 years of surveys times 30 people. It's a little bit more than that. But, we're getting 240 times 10 surveys a year. And our surveys, out of a 5 stars, we're getting, I'm sorry, I think it's 4 stars. We're getting 4 out of 4 stars, almost to a T, on their experience and on the value that we're giving them. So that is a really good reflection of what I think we're doing.
Yeah. What's kind of been the biggest thing you've implemented that you thought was just a game changer for the program, or, maybe, I don't want to say the star of the show, because, it's a whole program you go through. You can't have one thing without the others. But what's one thing you're extremely proud of that your people go through? Yeah,
so our surveys tell us that they love the networking, to meet new people and to be a part of that, and to learn about them, each other. What I'm most proud about, I think, is the collaboration in each class. Because remember, every year I have a whole new class, and so you just get to know someone like really well, and you love these people, and you're like, that person is outstanding, and I love being around them. And then they're gone. Now we do have an alumni association, but for the most part, now you're bringing in a whole new group. And so we just brought in a whole new group in September. We'll have our October session coming up, and getting to know them. But I think the biggest thing is how they then interact with each other, how cooperative they are. And then, as I kind of mentioned there, we have the Shark Tank competition, that they choose a subject and if there's an issue in the community and they want to solve that issue, or have an impact on that issue, whether that's a special project or maybe even collaborating with a nonprofit that's already going, that they can add something to that. I just saw something on CBS Sunday Morning that there's this concept of there's this library of things, and it's out in, I think, Massachusetts or Vermont, and you can go to the library and you get books, and you can get you can get videos, and you can get all kinds of different things at the library. But now they have a library of things, and so if you need a weed whacker just to borrow for a week, you can get a weed whacker. If you need a refrigerator for a graduation party, or there's all kinds, and there's all these different things. And so that I'm going to I'm going to introduce that to the class, that there's 5 different groups doing projects, and that's something that I think would serve our community really well. Is if we had this opportunity, and I don't know all the details, we'd have to do that, but they then have a Shark Tank, and we have a panel of stakeholders. It's kind of like what was that show, American Idol?
Yeah.
And so they have this panel of judges, and then they pick one of those groups out, and we partner with the United Way, and they give us a grant, and they get to go forward with that project. So that's what I think I'm most proud of, is putting those relationships together, with the United Way, with our stakeholders, with our classmates, being able to then form a project, and they compete against it. So that's fun. I always go back to sports, which they're competing against each other, for the whole year, to be able to win that grant, to be able to take their project then to the community.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned.
Go ahead.
So you mentioned the importance of networking. What would you tell somebody who may be nervous or intimidated to network with people?
Yeah, there are folks that, because we do a DISC assessment for everybody, and that DISC assessment is an acronym, DISC, and it shows you what type of leader you are. There's no right or wrong answer. Some people are really analytical. Some people are, the D is for driver, and kind of a hard driver. That's kind of who we always image as these, as the leaders of these companies, but that's not always the case. Some, it's really sharp, innovative, intuitive folks that are analytical, that are that person. So we show you what your personality is, and then how you work better with others in that case. So we really help people with that. We also give them, the opportunity for public speaking and training there, and the opportunity that they can certainly grow from those different things that they're learning from their discs. So I would tell you this: I've seen some of the most, I would say, introverted or shy folks really break out of their shell because of Allen Lima leadership and their experience. Or they start to get comfortable, week 1, or month 1, month 2, month 3. By about week 4, they're really comfortable with each other, and they're interacting, and we do different type of team building games and so forth. So all of that, I think, goes into that soup that really helps people who may be introverted and not necessarily be the life of the party.
Yeah. Well, with that, let's jump into our last segment here, Matt. It's called our quick fire question segment.
I've heard it. Yes, I've heard it.
So let's just get right into it. Tea or coffee to start the day?
Tea or coffee?
Tea or coffee to start the day?
Tea or coffee? I'd say coffee with a heavy dose of cream.
Just 1 cup?
Yeah.
One cup.
Not a lot.
Awesome. What is your favorite local business?
Oh, I thought there was more there.
Well, besides your own. So besides the chamber.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Local business.
Yeah. Oh, well, should we take Thermal Gard off it too? Paul Illig, should we take that off?
Yeah, we can take that off.
Yeah, he's my guy from many, many years ago. My favorite business. I probably have to say that it's the Beer Barrel, just because I go there too often. They should be giving me some type of kickback, but and I think they actually do have that program. But I'm gonna say Beer Barrel.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What is one word to describe entrepreneurship?
Vision.
Vision. That's amazing. And then what is the biggest business myth?
I would say the biggest business myth is that. Well, I don't know if anybody ever says it's a piece of cake, because I don't really know anybody who said that, but it's definitely not a piece of cake. I think you really have to, and especially today, I'm actually using, in my fourth quarter of my professional career, I'm using ChatGPT a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have to be able to be adaptive, and you have to be able to be somebody who looks forward. Usually, in most, I'm saying this as a political science history person, LOL, that I've studied the presidency a lot, is usually the people that win the presidency win it because they have a vision of going forward, what's going to happen forward, and not looking backwards. And so I would say, from that standpoint, that I think is essential in business, is to be able to have a vision to look forward, and be able to, Blockbuster, they had an opportunity with Netflix to become, Netflix just wanted to be their streaming partner. You go into Blockbuster, you get your videos, and you rent them and you bring them back. And Netflix just wanted to be that. And Blockbuster down in San Antonio, Texas, told them no. And then the rest is history. Blockbuster is out of business, basically, and Netflix is, dominating the streaming scene. So I would say a vision. And then couple that with what you just asked me.
Yeah, business is cake is definitely a myth.
Yeah.
So, is there any sort of like quote or maybe something you've held on to throughout, your entire maybe childhood career that has just kept you going? It's been inspirational, something you've leaned on.
Yeah, I mean, my family, I had on my mother's side, the matriarch of our family came from Marion, and the patriarchal side came from Kenton. They were attorneys. My great grandfather worked for Franklin Roosevelt, and he also was the head of the International Brotherhood of Magicians. His name was W.W. Durbin. It's my middle name, Matthew Durbin Childers, and their family motto was others, and I think I've carried that. Well, at least since my high school days. I was probably pretty selfish in my younger years, but since I've been in college and out, I feel like I have always looked to help others or be conscious of others. And so others is our family motto. And to me, that is, it's not what the American spirit's all about, but it's somewhat what the American spirit is all about, is being able to help others. And I've always felt really good. I've always felt better, helping somebody out and seeing them grow, like the leaders, the emerging leaders in my Allen Lima leadership group, when they get promotions and they send me an email and they say, "Hey, I just got promoted. Thanks so much for this or that." And so others is the phrase or the catchphrase for me, and I think it served me well.
Awesome. Well, we will have all your contact info, for all in the description.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Guys, definitely check that out. We just want to say thank you for coming on
Thank
today,
you
Matt.
for having me. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
And thank you to iHeart for having us in the studio today.
Yeah, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.